What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Tiny Webinars. We're hanging out today to go deep on stay interviews. I want to thank Jillian for sending this topic in. Shout out, Jillian. Oh my gosh, I can't even scroll through this. I can't find you. And all you who echo the desire to learn more about this topic, if you want Dr. Voiles' expertise to cover your topic on our next show, send me an email. Dear Andrew at tinypulse.com. Love to hear your thoughts for this show. Before we get started, some quick housekeeping. Next month, TinyCon 2021, our biggest event of the year. It's going to be online September 28th. We got Omar Shaheen, VP of Product at Microsoft Office 365. Big group at Microsoft, OneDrive, SharePoint, and now Viva, their employee experience platform at Microsoft. We got Dr. Laura Hamill, Chief Science Advisor at Limeade, sharing the science behind employee well-being. We got Dave Haidu, Tiny Pulse's head of product, is going to share some revolutionary new tech from Tiny Pulse with you. We got Capital One, we've got Gensler hanging out with us, an amazing lineup of speakers who are going to show you how to navigate the new challenges. Seems like we're being thrown at every day in this world of work. Tickets are $29, but because you're here on this tiny webinar, if you buy your ticket this week, I'll give you a complimentary TinyCon ticket to share with a colleague. So step one, there aren't even 3 steps. All you got to do is go over to tinycon.com, buy your ticket before the week is out, and then go tell that friend or colleague, I got you free admission to TinyCon. That's going to feel really good. I'll email you easy instructions on how you can get that person in. So, okay, stay with me, folks. The Q3 State of Employee Engagement, Dr. Voiles' latest benchmarking survey closes tomorrow, end of day tomorrow. So 1 in 3 businesses says, no, we're not going back to normal, not going back to business as usual. A majority of employees support a vaccine mandate at work. That's interesting. And nearly half of businesses report it's harder to hire now than it was pre-COVID. Get even deeper insights when you respond to this benchmarking survey, which was covered by Bloomberg, CNN, LA Times last quarter. So you'll participate in something that's getting a ton of publicity. If you haven't taken it, it takes 5 minutes. Send me an email at dearandrew@tinypulse.com. I'll send you a quick link to take the survey and you're in. Oh, and by the way, we're picking 3 respondents to win a $100 Amazon gift card. So that's pretty cool, courtesy of Dr. Voiles. Today, use that Q&A box in your Zoom below, or use the chat. We're watching both. Dr. Voiles is going to share some frameworks on stay interviews with you, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So we make sure we answered your particular question, your challenges. Finally, don't forget to leave me feedback on today's show. Do it before you jump into your next meeting. I'll send you the email link, but let me know if you like today and how we can do better. All right, Dr. Voiles, what do you have for us today?
Thanks for the introduction and for all of the awesome announcements, Andrew. I was wondering, and Dawn dropped this in the Q&A too. Can we drop the link to our
Awesome.
human
I'm going to drop
resources
that.
and people leader survey?
That's a fantastic idea. I'll do that right now.
Yeah, we'll drop it in the chat so that you can take advantage. It's a survey that I love doing because we analyze those results and then we deliver those results back to you to give you insights about what organizations are doing. So just to get us started, we have this poll question that you answered when you were coming in, as far as whether you do stay interviews, exit interviews, both or neither. And it looks like most people, and this is actually what I privately predicted, the majority say they do exit interviews only. The next highest group was that they do both, followed by none. And then there's 1% that do stay interviews only. So it's interesting that a lot of people do exit interviews. And when I get the slides started up here for you, I'm going to compare and contrast stay and exit interviews for all of you. So first, to get started, this presentation is really focused on stay interviews, and it's relevant for anyone in human resources, people management and leadership. And it's also relevant for anyone who's considering, especially doing these interviews. So here's me. I'm Dr. Laura Voiles. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist and a people scientist with Tiny Pulse. My expertise kind of falls within the realm of any kind of people management, engagement, things. I also do things like job analysis and let's see, leadership development, survey development, research. So there's a variety of areas within industrial organizational psychology that I have expertise in. So I wanted to start our presentation by first discussing, what is a stay interview and what is an exit interview. So the stay interview is focused on proactively gathering information. So you're talking to your employees, usually direct reports. You're asking them about what keeps them in the organization and also what might be pushing them away. The exit interview is where you meet with the employees who are already leaving. They've already given their 2 weeks. They have told you they're resigning. Some people in the literature have likened this to the equivalent of an autopsy. It's already done. There's nothing more you can do for that person, but they might give you insights. For example, during a stay interview, an employee may not be willing to discuss something that's very, delicate, or that they feel there might be retribution if it comes out. But upon exit, they don't have so much to lose. So really, like I mentioned, that difference between the stay interview and the exit interview is it's too late to make the changes for people who are leaving. And so this makes the stay interview a really important piece. That stay interview lets you catch issues before anyone's leaving. So part of kind of what I'm hoping to convince you of today is if you aren't doing stay interviews, to consider adding them as part of your people management strategy. So why should you conduct stay interviews? For one, it gives you actionable information to address employee concerns. It gives you that kind of idea of what might be driving your employees away, and it helps prevent you from being caught by surprise. It also gives that opportunity for employees to build trust with their managers and with you, and to disclose their concerns. It builds that bridge. So even when you aren't doing stay interviews later, if they've had that opportunity to disclose to you or their manager, they're more likely to continue that. And then finally, just by engaging in stay interviews, it communicates and demonstrates to your employees that their opinions and their happiness at the organization matter, that you value them. So before we delve really deep, I actually want to implore you to get into the chat and tell me, if I were to do a stay interview with you now, I'm not your manager, but let's say your manager were to do a stay interview with you, what would be the aspect that you would mention as your favorite part of your job? What keeps you there? So go ahead and drop it in the chat.
Nice. And I see that Gina has a nice trick for reframing stay interviews and calling them investment interviews, which I think is amazing. Oh my gosh, we got so many responses in here. People seems to be an amazing topic here. Sweet. Culture, teamwork. Great. I'm gonna drop a next poll question here on stay investment interviews. How would you rate your ability to get those done?
So it looks like from a lot of the chat that it really surrounds the idea of people and culture, and that these are the main drivers for all of you to stay with your organization. So now take a moment and get into that poll and rate your ability that you feel you're able to that you're able to conduct stay interviews. So are you at wizard level, or have you never tried it and you're totally inexperienced?
Nice. We'll give it another 20 seconds or so here, folks. I mean, I even got almost 100% participation here.
Oh yeah, yeah. So 46% have never tried state interviews before. So it's totally new to you. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. And then we have the next biggest group is three. Three, I know how they work, but need improvement. And then we have some in the 4 level and the 2 level. So we went over why conduct state interviews. I want to emphasize that it's more important than ever. So we're experiencing the great resignation, as I'm sure you've heard. It's getting harder to hire talent, and it's also easier to lose employees right now. So in a survey that I conducted, actually our last Q4, we found that a lot of human resources and people leaders were not predicting high attrition. However, in many other surveys, employees have reported that they have the intention to quit. And so this is why stay interviews can provide a tool for you detecting if an employee is considering quitting. So this kind of shows you how there could be a disconnect. And stay interviews will help you kind of make a connection with your employees and better understand what they need and help them stay with your organization. So how often and who should do the interviews? You should conduct them 1 to 2 times a year. More frequently if you feel that there are issues within the organization, or if you feel that you have a new employee and you want to make sure that they are satisfied with their work. For new hires, you want to catch them early within the first 3 months so that you can ensure that their path in the organization is a clear one and that you are guiding them as their manager. So that brings me to the next part, which is that managers should ideally be the ones doing these stay interviews. And ideally, they should be trained. If you're a human resources leader, it's great to talk with your managers, provide training and a script to them so that they know how to conduct these interviews. And then human resources should also provide a specific list of questions so that we can keep it consistent across managers. And with the training, it can include things like recommendations on how to probe for more information, or for example, how much they need to listen to employees. So 80% of what they do should be listening. I'll go ahead and pause for a second so we can get any kind of Q&As and any chats that we need to kind of
Yeah,
catch up
absolutely.
with.
And for those of you coming in, Dr. Voel's getting over a bit of a bug or something, so we'll let her catch her breath as well. If you do have those questions, drop them in that Q&A. Upvote those that you want us to answer the most. That way we know. And so Meredith asks, can these be done as part of regular one-on-ones or separate? Yeah, I'll just respond real quick. As as coming from the leadership side myself, absolutely run these as one-on-ones. Why? Because a lot of times getting the insights that you need as to a really great question is, hey, what's it going to take for you to be here for the next 5 years? Like, let's go there and let's have that conversation. The only way you're going to be able to do that is by building a relationship with that person. So if it is HR coming in, if it is member of senior leadership, or if it's a skip level, that's going to have an effect on those results. So make sure it's someone that you either do have a relationship with, and you built that up, or invest that time to build that relationship. Why? Because having that relationship is what's going to build trust. So I know Karen's question, Dr. Wells, you probably have an opinion on.
Yeah, I do on each of them. Thanks for stepping in there. Yeah, my voice has been going in and out. So for Karen, I actually have 5 questions that I recommend that you always ask, but I encourage you to get creative with your questions as well. So we'll come up and we'll go through those in just a moment. And for Meredith's question, I think it's recommended that they are done as a part of regular one-on-ones. that makes it actually more of an informal kind of discussion. So this gets Brenda's question too. It's more informal, which is actually what you want. You don't want employees to feel like they're under a microscope. You want them to feel that it's an informal chat where they can express things that they need and also any concerns that they have, and that their manager is really their partner to help them kind of bridge the gap in anything that they need. And of course, within reason. So we'll need to talk about managing expectations. Let's see, Laura, how do you recommend holding teams and managers accountable for hosting the stay interviews? Oh, that's a great question. I would say, it depends on if you've been having some resistance to that. I would say that you might like to, for example, give your managers a span of time to conduct these stay interviews. Another recommendation would be what's called the cascading model, where you start from the top and actually leaders highest in the organization first conduct the stay interviews, and then they get the next level and the next level, so that everyone will have had a stay interview before they give a stay interview. This helps with accountability because everyone knows that the next person in line needs to do that. Bella's question.
I'll just respond to that. Laura, your question is really good. It's probably from a manager standpoint, I think this is really important, because to say, hey, we're doing stay interviews and then expecting managers to do it. Yes, you should absolutely trust managers to do it. But if they're not, if you feel you have to hold somebody accountable, therein is the problem. That it means that you haven't shown the value to them yet. It means that they don't understand the value of this and why it's going to help them keep their best talent, and why it's going to help them attract the best, and why it's going to help them understand their employees and build those trusting relationships with them. So if you feel that you have to hold people accountable, and you shouldn't want to hold people accountable. Yes, you may have to, especially if someone is like being blatantly like not doing it, but it's really important to get a sense as to do the managers understand the value of this, and if so, great. But if not, it means that we've got more work to do to both sell this internally, but then two is to continue to keep it top of mind. So that's a really important piece of it.
I wholeheartedly agree. Andrew's making a great point here. The other piece is, if it's that hard to get them to do the stay interview in the first place, it might actually even be worse if they do the stay interview and then don't follow up on any of the feedback that the employee gets. So then that becomes disempowering for the employee. So I would say, if that's a concern, you have deeper problems that need to be addressed before pushing anyone to do a stay interview. Let's see, from Jessica, we choose to do this in our professional development team instead of the manager doing them, so they're more honest. That definitely has its benefits. One advantage of doing it with managers is that the manager a lot of times can take more direct action because they work directly with them. But I also agree, if you're doing it on a separate, removed team, that allows employees to be a little more forthcoming, particularly if it is like an issue that they're facing with their manager. Lori, let's see, how are stay interviews different from one-on-one and from the performance development process? So here's one thing, I actually have it later in the slides, but always keep your stay interview separate from performance discussions. The stay interview purpose is really to discuss what the employee needs and not to be an evaluation of how they're doing currently. So always keep those things separate, because employees may not be feeling safe to express what they need or what their concerns are if they feel that they're being evaluated in that moment. They could blend it into one-on-ones somewhat. So let's say you have like a weekly one-on-one. You might also include this as part of one of those one-on-ones.
These next two questions from Alan and Don might be wrapped up in a similar concept, which is, would employees be more honest with someone other than their manager? Maybe, because depending on the relationship that manager is built with the report, uh, correct, there might be reason to be less transparent or not be very forthcoming, or present things in a way that maybe just aren't as constructive. So, and that's wrapped up in Don's question. How do you control for exit factors like discontent with the manager or team structure challenges the managers are ones who are running these interviews? So run both. Because,
Yeah.
or even create a channel for anonymity, a safe channel for communication. I think that's really the bottom line, whether that's using surveys, if it's a different tool, or using a third party, things like that. It's not going to replace those one-on-one conversations, but it's going to help you understand and build and paint the complete picture as to either what's being said or not being said, depending on the circumstances.
Yeah, Andrew's absolutely right about that. If you're concerned that there might be these negative relationships with managers preventing stay interviews from being forthcoming and successful, then an anonymous survey might be a great way to start, particularly if you have that kind of organizational context where there's a lack of trust. Because all of this relies on a foundation of trust. For stay interviews to be successful, they have to trust the person who they're speaking with, who's usually their manager. So Bella asks, what are some ways to get buy-in from the leaders to do this? What's in it for me? I think first you can make the argument that it helps make sure that people are not turning over, and you can demonstrate for them the cost of turnover in your organization. There's a really handy spreadsheet in SHRM that you can use to calculate the cost of turnover. You can also talk about how beneficial having engaged employees are for your organization. And these will help kind of provide the foundation so that you can get the green light. Once you get that permission to go forward with stay interviews, just sharing back some of the results and what kind of stay plans you've developed can be helpful for creating the case to continue doing these stay interviews.
Yeah, I think as a leader, it's important to think about, okay, what are I'm going to say it's the selfish benefit of the leader. What does that person want? They want their team, they want to accomplish their goals so that, the company can accomplish their goals. Everybody wants to do well in their career. So how do you couch this, Bella, as how this is going to help the leader? How is this going to help you become a better leader? It's by getting buy-in from people, and not just telling them what to do, but including them in the process. Maybe there are reasons why a leader has made decisions that reports just don't understand yet. But having these conversations is going to help that leader understand, okay, well, what do I need to do so that I can own this situation and help? If something hasn't been explained well enough, then that leader knows, okay, I need to go and either couch this a different way, or maybe I need to spend more time explaining this, or and understand, okay, well, what do my employees get, what do they not get, and what's going to help motivate them, which is generally including them in that decision process. So it's going to help them become a better leader, and by doing that, they're going to be able to get reports to do what they need, what the leader needs them to do. And I think that's a pretty compelling one, if that's hard to fight with.
So let's pause for just a moment on the questions and then go through a couple more slides, and then we'll come back to questions.
Oh yes, we got lots of folks who are here for the templates.
Yeah, so I provided an outline of questions that I'd love to share. So I think it's a great recommendation for human resources to actually provide, even, for example, a word for word explanation of kind of why they're doing the stay interview, what questions to do, and then what managers should do after the stay interview. So first, I recommend, this is all the really practical advice, just so you know, like these next few slides. Set the stage. Allow at least 30 minutes when scheduling that stay interview, and frame it as a time to check in. Frame it as, an informal discussion. I actually drafted out language that you could copy and paste Just saying, I'd like to have an informal discussion to better understand how you feel about this job. As your manager, I want to focus on how I can support you in your success at, and then insert your company name. So you can take it word for word, or spin it however you like, but that's a great way to open up the discussion and have your employee feeling comfortable. You can also talk to them about confidentiality, and you could say, there are certain things I can keep confidential, but if you want me to take action on this, we'll have to take it up, at a higher level, but I'll get your permission first. So kind of tell them what their expectations should be in terms of confidentiality. So here, I think a lot of people have been waiting, the top 5 recommended questions. What do you like the most about working here? And then I'll ask you to drop this one in the chat if you're comfortable. If your manager were to ask you today, what do you like least about working here? What would you say? So drop that in the chat if you're comfortable. What would you like to learn here? What motivates or demotivates you? And then what can I do to best support you? So I've selected these questions because it picks the high point of, what are the positives? What should we do more? What should we do less? What are the negatives? And then also employees' needs for growth and development, as well as motivation, can help you detect if an employee is struggling with motivation and therefore disengaged. And then also what the manager can do. And I want to emphasize that it's really important when you're talking about stay interviews to let employees know that you can only do so much, that you can only address things that are in your control, but that you're there to listen for any other concerns as well.
Folks, we will email out today's slides for you.
Absolutely.
So you don't need to screenshot or do anything like that.
Let's revisit the chat and the questions, just to kind of see. I'm curious what people said in terms of what they like least about their jobs. Oh, Allison said, wouldn't it be nice to be asked that by a supervisor? Yeah, I think that supervisors and managers who don't conduct stay interviews are missing a really good opportunity. And I think some of it's just time. Some of it never crosses their mind. The other thing is, as a manager, it takes a lot of vulnerability to ask, hey, what complaints do you have? Because it could be that one of their complaints has to do with your work style.
It's just the fact that you are asking shows vulnerability, but also that you are willing to own the problem. Now, I think this is wrapped up in some further comments and questions about, okay, well, what happens if management doesn't do something about that? And that tends to be where this breaks down. And we'll talk about that in just a little second. But Dr. Voss has some more resources that she can share with you on this topic.
Yeah, I have plenty more to share. Just to kind of go through the chat, it seems like some of the complaints are, well, actually, what's interesting is a lot of the complaints are around upper management and supervisors, either lack of taking feedback seriously, feeling that the team kind of sometimes lets you down. Again, another issue with management. Oh, and I see a question here by Caroline, whether I recommend human resources do stay interviews. In an ideal world, I recommend that human resources trains managers on how to do stay interviews, and they provide the script and the questions and the guidance. In a rare case where there's an issue where an employee really isn't trusting their manager, or a manager for whatever reason is leaving, the employee's being promoted, there might be a reason to have human resources do the stay interview. But usually I would recommend the manager do it, because it would kind of cut out the middleman. If you have human resources conducting that stay interview, probably a lot of times they're still going to have to go back to the manager and say, hey, your employee said XYZ, we need to work on these things. So it's great to have kind of the direct employee to manager conversation when possible. There could be situations, though, where it may not be conducive. Mm-hmm. Yep. It seems that a lot of the concerns are really about upper management.
I think these refer to like, well, what do I not like about my job if I were to respond to that in a stay interview as well.
And we had, before we move on, I saw just one more question pop up from Brenda, asking, what if human resources sits in on a stay interview, but the manager leads? I would generally not recommend that because it might to the employee feel too formal and maybe even disciplinary or like accusatory. Like they feel like if they say anything negative that it's accusing because human resources is there. And I'm sure everyone who's in human resources knows there's that attitude sometimes from employees like, oh no, human resources, is someone getting fired? They get kind of riled up. So I would say generally it's better to not have human resources in the state interview.
Absolutely. And I think that's where no longer becomes conversation, and becomes committee when three or more people start becoming a part of a stay interview. And it's almost as if it couches it like, hey, what the employees expressing, what they are sharing is subject to the approval of others. And that can be the tone that comes across. I really recommend having it be a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, and employees may feel less willing to speak up even about little issues that are still bothering them because they think, oh, HR is here, it needs to be serious. So I put a quick list of tips together for conducting stay interviews. To the right, I also showed an image of a book. Richard Finnegan is the leader in stay interviews, writes most of the SHRM articles, has given presentations, and even has an institute to train people to do stay interviews. So I definitely recommend checking out his book. When you can, ensure that confidentiality and also clearly communicate the purpose of the stay interviews. And here's one really big thing I want to note. Before conducting any stay interviews with any of your employees, actually announce broadly that you're going to do this. That way, employees don't feel ambushed or surprised whenever you start conducting or schedule a stay interview, because you don't want them to get that schedule request and think, oh no, like, are they doing this with me in particular? Is there something going on? So if you let them know you're doing it with everyone ahead of time, they'll feel more comfortable. Also focus on discussing and understanding the employee's needs. You should be listening about 80% of the time and only speaking 20% of the time. And really take this as a time to remain neutral and express that gratitude and appreciation for employees. So, express that you want them to stay, that you're glad to have them, and that, you want to find out what you can do to help. And then upon concluding the stay interview, establish a plan for following up on the information that they've given you. You can even run it by them. You could say, I heard you discuss that you have this issue where you feel like you don't get enough recognition. I'm going to work on giving you recognition in every meeting. So I want to kind of recognize whatever you've done best in the past week. So kind of come up with a plan and then check back and say, is this something that would work for you? And then understand the context of that company culture. So if you have a lack of trust within the whole culture, it may not be the ideal time to do a stay interview. And then the last point is that, yes, you do the stay interview, but once you're done, it's not complete and you don't throw it away. During your one-on-ones with your employees, always look out for stay interview information. So if they mention that they've been feeling burned out, it might be time to even pause and have that informal discussion of, what can I do to help? So it's not just like closing the book on it once you've done your stay interviews.
So we got a lot of great questions as well. We'll jump into those right away, folks. But before that, these slides are cool. I love this.
Okay, yeah. So I'll just go through this quickly and then we'll go through the questions. Across the top, I recommend that you first select stay interview questions and the cadence. Are you going to do it yearly? Are you going to do it a couple times a year? Keep a record of the interview notes. And also, before you start taking notes during the stay interview, let your employee know and let them know that you just want to make sure you don't forget anything that's important. And then identify those key themes and develop an action plan. And tell the employee what your action plan is. so that you can make sure that it's something that you feel will satisfy the need. On the bottom, you can help prioritize what to put in your action plan by forecasting what you think retention will be. You can even kind of ask employees. So if you think an employee is likely to leave within 6 months, that's where you might need to prioritize what concerns they have. And then if you think, 6 to 12 months, that's where that might be kind of mid-level. If you think they're likely to stay, it's only making any priorities you make are just to make it better for them while they're at the organization. So I'll pause here and let Andrew bring up some of the chat questions in the Q&As.
Awesome. Well, Gina has been a power contributor here. Gina, this is a fantastic tip. I would just recommend this to anybody, is having a template of questions and sending it to the employee a week before doing the interview so they have an opportunity to think about those questions and allowing that person to feel like they're more in control. So rather than, hey, I'm going to call you into my office and we're going to have this conversation or Zoom or whatever it might be, you send those questions ahead. And what does that do? That tells the report something. It tells them, hey, I'd like you to be thoughtful about these on your own time. I'm going to front load you with these so that your time is valuable, and so that we make the most of our discussion. And this can work for any of your meetings. You should always send an agenda ahead of time. But that's a really great tactic from Gina. So thank you. We'll have you on the show next time. So Jules, this is an interesting one. I see a little bit of a thread blowing up here. It's what is an alternative to calling them stay interviews? And I see that Christine and Gina have responded to this. We were calling them feedback interviews. Great. And Gina mentioned before calling them investment interviews, which has that connotation. Well, this is so that we can invest in the future here. And I think that says something as well, which is, hey, we're going to take this time, we're going to invest this time so that there's a payoff later. Okay. And that's where we get into, hey, what is that payoff? Paint that picture. It's so that you have a really healthy career here so that you can do the things that you care about in life. And so that, the organization wins as well. So I really think that brings everyone onto the same side of that table. So whether you call them stay interviews or investment interviews or feedback interviews, think about what your culture is like and what is going to go over well with your employees. What are they going to love? And if stay interviews is just kind of, if the culture is kind of like, I don't know, talk to a trusted colleague of yours and find out, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And if they love it, then chances are you're onto something. And maybe ask a few more people. If it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe you got some more work to do on how you market this internally.
Yeah, and I think letting employees know early on is really helpful. And I like the term investment interviews, if that works with your organization.
Great. And then let's see. Karen has an interesting comment experience here. My problem in the past has been sharing information from stay interviews with upper management who do not act on things brought up in the stay interview. Okay, so this comes into like upper management and taking action. Action plans is going to help you. I know this is one of those pieces. I end up feeling like we have let the employee down when that happens, and that real trust cannot be developed. So this is an important one. Dr. Voiles, what do you think?
So I think first, when the employee brings up an issue that you'll need to bring to upper management, you should manage the employee's expectations and let them know, this isn't completely in my hands, but here's what I'm going to do. And so let them know that they may not get the resolution that they want, but that you're going to help them try to get that resolution. And then I think on the back end, communicate with upper management why it's important and make it easy for them to say yes. So if it's an issue of an employee feeling that they need a flexible schedule to manage like family responsibilities, and you have to get upper management permission, for example, go ahead and work with upper management and find out how you can make this happen. Be your employee's advocate.
And I think this ties into, Brenda, you had a comment earlier in the chat, like owners and upper management are inconsistent with support to HR and reinforcing policies and procedures that they want approved or want implemented. And if this is happening to you folks, if you feel like you're pounding the table to get advocacy and the investment to do something like this, which I think is so important to any company, seriously think about, does this upper management, do they understand HR and its importance and the investments that are required for something that's going to always show up as a really big item on in terms of expenses and investment? It's people. And if they don't understand that, it might be time to look at and find a place that does, because you deserve that. Fantastic. Okay. Megan, would you recommend this be documented so it can be shared with upper management or others? And I think we covered that, but refer back to those slides, Megan, and we'll send those right after this. But definitely, there are some best practices. There's also a really good book. I just saw it. It's on how to take really good minutes. And to be able to do that in different situations, like taking a board meeting minutes is very different from taking a stay interview. And I would really focus on, hey, how does this make the person feel? And try to find those little bits and put those onto your pile, because those chances are those are the ones that are going to affect their day-to-day. And when their feelings affect their beliefs and how they think about work, that's what's going to affect their behaviors at work and how they how that manifests itself in output or product or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and just adding on to that aspect of minutes and keeping track of what employees say. I've seen a few questions come across. Sorry if we don't get to every question. There's so many, and I want to answer them all. So we'll try to get to as many as we can. But I saw a question about, should you keep notes from past stay interviews? And I recommend that as a manager, you do, so that you can follow up. So you could say, you could even include as part of your stay interview, last year I saw that this was a concern for you. Here's what we did. Has that resolved the problem, or what's the status? And so that shows the employee that you are remembering what their concerns are, and that you're actively addressing what their concerns were, and also checking back again.
So I may bring a few folks on our channel here to speak about their question. I'm going to get into a tactical one here. It's a pair of questions by Tracy. Bella, I may call on you in just a second here. I want to know more about your question. But Tracy's question, should we ask, do you plan on staying here in the future, in the next 1 year, in the next 5 years, etc.? And Gloria says, I would ask, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? First of all, this is a fantastic question, but I would really encourage you to think about the open-endedness of the question. So if you ask, do you plan on staying here in the next 1 year? Sorry, that's my dog. Do you plan on staying here in 1 year? The two most likely answers you're going to get is yes and no. And that's tough to work with. But if you couch this as, hey, what's it going to take for you to stay here for the next 5 years? So I'd say the amount of time is less relevant than you couching the question in a way that you get the maximum concrete insights. So what's it going to take for you to be here 5 years, 10 years, whatever it might be, the next year, depending
That's a
on the
great
tenure.
suggestion.
That person is more likely to couch this as not yes and no, but okay, well, what's it actually going to take? And you'll hear a little bit more about this at TinyCon, but you should absolutely, and you can argue this in many different ways, but some people might say, hey, should it be outside of compensation? So that you can get at the stuff that you can do that's not necessarily talking to finance. But compensation, salary, benefits are important to people. And if that is a meaningful part of that and affects them at work, you should be asking about those things. So open-endedness, and be sure to get all of the insights. So fantastic question, Tracy. So Bella, do you want to tell us more about what you mean about your question here? I'm gonna put you on speaker.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we currently do not do stay interviews, and I'm wondering, like, as a best practice, what you advise on like advertising that you're doing stay interviews. So if your leadership agrees to do this, do you send a communication to the organization, the entire organization, so managers and employees know? Do you send it just to managers? And also for a little bit of context, I think we're initially starting, if we do stay interviews, we'll probably start with our new folks who've started within like the past 90 days or something.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So I have some advice for you, Bella. It's this. It's don't announce them as stay interviews. Like, I think the temptation is to say stay interviews, right? And here's what it's going to involve. But instead of that, what is the benefits of doing those stay interviews? It's going to help people reach their career goals. It's going to help them help leaders understand and become better leaders. It's going to help people skill up. It's going to help people understand, hey, and actually lick the problems that are blocking great working relationships and working well together. And when you have something that has a headline that says that, yeah, I'm going to be listening, have a nice, really long career here with and have a great relationship with my managers. If you can couch it that way, then, hey, how are we going to do this? Oh, we're going to do this via a series of very structured conversations called stay interviews. You can go look it up if you want, but just presenting it in that order. If you just start it with stay interviews and then saying in the fine print, hey, here are the benefits of that, just reversing that is going to help you sell this internally. And I think it can be very accessible to just about everybody if you do it that way. But I know, Dr. Voiles, you have an opinion on this one.
Yeah, I would agree with going ahead and announcing it through the organization. I would also recommend that you have managers contact their employees individually and let them know that they are conducting these with all of their employees, just so everyone has the heads up. Thank you, Bella, for bringing this up. I think it's great that you're starting stay interviews. Another kind of initiative you could do before launching is you could speak with managers and kind of have them feel out whether they feel comfortable starting these interviews or kind of what the starting point might be. So it depends on the culture of your organization as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to look through the chat, but
oh, there's one I wanted to get in.
Awesome.
Benoit brought up, should the questions always be positive or should we ask tough questions? And I actually suggest that you ask in both ways, because if you only ask positive questions, if you only say, what do you love about this organization? What do you want to learn? What are you excited about? You're only going to get that side, but that doesn't invite the employees to also bring their complaints. And so you may get a false belief that your employees are really happy because they haven't been invited to express what makes them unhappy. So ask questions in both ways. And it goes the same way too. If you only ask negative questions like, what's your biggest gripe? Then you're going to think your employees are totally unhappy. So you want the balanced view. Andrew, what other questions do we have?
Carolyn, I know you have a question about skip level interviews. I'm gonna allow you to unmute here. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Hello.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, how are you?
Not too bad. Thanks for joining us.
I'm just wondering, since we've done a couple stay interviews or throughout our process, and but we've also tried and explored doing skip level interviews as well, because to your point, it's not HR, and so they don't feel that HR relatedness associated with any type of meeting with them, but it's also an upline, so they feel that they're being heard, especially if the relationship with their existing direct manager does not exist, but couching it in a conversational type of check-in and things like that. So do you recommend kind of collaborating the stay and the skip potentially depending on the size of the group and the organization? It just seems like, with everything that's going on in most organizations of trying to improve core values, diversity and inclusion, and everything else that's going on, and with the difficulty, as you mentioned earlier, about hiring in this time, which we think it would be easier to hire in this time, it's not, it's harder. And kind of realizing that, so not just doing stay interviews, but really looking at skip level interviews so that you can figure out some of the things that may or may not be happening within your organization.
Yeah, I would support skip level interviews. I think it's a great initiative. It also helps address one of the issues that a lot of people have brought up in the chat, and that's a frequent kind of irritant with this, and that's that people gather all this data from the stay interviews and then can't get upper management to do anything about it. But if you're already speaking directly to upper management, it can help them take action, especially when they hear it right from the employee. Has that been your experience?
Well, definitely. I mean, and sometimes it's, when you're so close to your managers to begin with from a direct perspective, and you have your one-on-ones, you feel like everything's being communicated all the time. Which, when people leave the organization, you find out, okay, maybe that communication wasn't as great as I thought, and that maybe it wasn't as clear and transparent as I thought. And so, one of the things that you'll see is, or that we saw when we did these, was that, it was things that had been brought up, and it might have been, a year ago versus like 6 months ago, but they really liked the idea, and it was maybe not considered carefully enough, or they didn't think it was considered carefully enough. But you brought it up to your upline, and they were like, oh, that's something that's coming down the line, because they have visibility. Upline people and management perspective, I think, have different optics on what's happening with the organization. They know about things that are coming down the line way in advance of like the regular day-to-day people that have to do the work. And so sometimes having that insight, because I think a lot of times throughout my career, I would have been less frustrated to know that it was on the roadmap already, something that had been an issue. And it's that level of transparency I think people were talking about in communication. And it's easier in smaller companies, harder in larger companies. We definitely understand that. But building that transparent communication and just what the organization is doing as a whole, I think, is really key in keeping people engaged, not just with these, stay interviews and skip levels and things like that, but just keeping people involved in knowing where and what the company as an organization wants to do in the environment as well as in the industry that they're in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I agree. Oh, go ahead.
Meredith dropped a quick question, which I think is related. How do you suggest announcing skip level interviews so you don't reports don't feel threatened? It's to actually have, similar to before, how do you announce this? Is to have it come from that senior level management who's doing the skipping, so to speak, because again, that's building that relationship. Have that person, if you can, have them buy coffee. I mean, $5. I mean, maybe it's like $6 depending on your size of latte these days. It's a small price to pay to give that person a voice and give them that extra channel of safe communication. Maybe it's that third party that we're talking about who maybe if that person doesn't feel comfortable speaking with a direct manager, but getting the transparent feedback up to the skip level, who may have an idea like, hey, I kind of have a sense as to what's going on here. Here's what I'm going to do to coach your direct manager. And oh my gosh, what a breath of fresh air that would probably be. So be sure, folks, to upvote questions, enter your questions in the Q&A. We only have a few minutes left. We're not going to get through all of these, so I'd love to be able to see these, prioritize so we can get to the ones that you want answered most. And I know that Dr. Voyles has a couple of quick more slides here.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple more things because these have also come up in the questions, but how you want to manage your stay interview data is, if you can, ensure that confidentiality. A lot of times issues that employees bring up might be issues for other employees as well. So you can introduce something as an initiative, not specifically for so-and-so. Also track the timing and the themes. So someone brought this up before, I think it was Benoit. If it was an issue last year, go ahead and circle back and make sure you check and see if it's still an issue that's continuing. Another thing that can be powerful for getting higher level management to take notice and start initiatives is to include direct quotes from your employees with their permission. You don't have to give their names, but you can directly quote and say, this part is really demotivating. I feel disempowered by XYZ. And I think that can help kind of personalize it for them. And then finally, list those actionable themes in order of priority, particularly if you think it's something that's really going to push employees to leave. And then here's the thing that I really want to emphasize, and that's why I wanted to get to this slide. What you do after that stay interview is just as important as what you do during the stay interview. So if you do the stay interview, your employee tells you all of these concerns and things that they like, the wins, the losses, and you do nothing, that really devalues and cancels out the stay interview. So make a list of priorities, create what some organizations call a stay plan, and actually discuss with the employee actions that you can take or how you plan to follow up. And then if you encounter those roadblocks, for example, upper level management, be transparent with them and share back the results and what the current status is so that they don't feel that lack of trust of, you're not doing anything. I'll pause now so we can jump in. Do we have a
Awesome.
little time for more
Tracy,
questions?
I wanna unmute you and I want to hear more about how you're thinking about the order in which you go after stay interviews. Tracy, do I have you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Ooh, barely. Let's try again.
Can you hear me now?
Awesome. Yeah, let's go for it.
So we're just starting stay interviews, and this has been very helpful so far. I'm glad I am listening in before we are starting. So you've offered a lot of great tips, but I'm wondering, like, who should we start with?
Okay.
As I talk with the managers and train the managers, should we start with those that are high potential employees, are good performers? Do we start in the middle? Those that have been here less than 6 months? Kind of where do we start?
Awesome. Thanks for the question. I love it. Coming through the field radio.
My suggestion would be, so there's a couple different ways you can tackle this. And thank you, Tracy, for your question. I think it's a great one. One way I would suggest is actually starting from the upper level management and working your way down. So everyone's had experience as being interviewed before they conduct an interview. If you're really at a critical point, though, where you're concerned about losing employees, I would say definitely, like you mentioned, prioritize those high potential employees, the good performers, and then kind of move down. But you want to make sure that it's not very obvious that you are only interviewing people who you feel are good performers first, if that makes sense. So be careful there, but that would be my recommendation. I want to see if Andrew has anything else he wants to add.
Yeah, I would approach it from that angle, and you check in the slides. Be sure to download this. I dropped the link in today's chat. There are some other nuggets, like interviewing the folks who are new to your organization within the first 3 months to get a sense, because that's typically where people are going to make that decision. Am I going to be here for a while, or should I continue looking? Because I'm already kind of just coming off of that mode of being in job search mode. Binoy, I saw your question about whether stay interviews are statistically, is there research to back this? Be sure to grab Richard Finnegan's book in the slides today. You can see that, just grab it on Amazon or your local bookseller, and you'll be able to find that super famous research, and you'll be able to find out all the rigor behind doing these. And then finally, folks, before I let you go to take your feedback survey, I would recommend too is when you think about this, is taking action. Take a look at that last slide here, because that is what's going to build the positive feedback loop here. This is what's going to help people rate you higher when you take a manager effectiveness assessment. And then over time, by beating the drum on this, you're going to find that managers are going to start to see the effectiveness of this. And as you start to build in these healthy habits, you will start to see where are the areas where I can pinpoint and improve. And I just think that together with Dr. Voiles' amazing advice here, you will have a better stay interview experience and get that much more out, because there are plenty more challenges coming as I understand it. So Dr. Voiles, you want to leave us with, wrap us up?
Sure. Yeah. So I think overall, doing stay interviews is better than not doing stay interviews. So if you have that opportunity, take it, and then make sure that you follow up. And if you're having your managers do it, make it easy for them. Provide them kind of an intro script, a list of questions, and then instructions for how to follow up. And if you really want to make sure that they're doing it and you're in human resources, loop back and check in and ask managers how the stay interviews went, and if there's any way that you can support them. I want to thank you all for coming to our webinar. Please come back for more topics. We're talking about other topics we want to cover, and we'd love to have you here.
Thanks a lot, everyone. I appreciate your feedback. We'll see you next time on Tiny Webinars.